A number of us here served in the military and spent 20 years fighting terrorists like Al-Qaeda and ISIS on the other side of the world. How do you treat Al-Qaeda and ISIS? Do you arrest them and treat them, pat them on the head and say, don't do that again? Or do you end the problem directly by taking a lethal, kinetic approach? And that's the way President Trump has authorized the War Department to look at these cartels.
Welcome back to Sunrise on the Hill at 8. Corey Smith, Judy Kurtz leading you for the next half hour. That was Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth in a cabinet meeting yesterday, speaking about a controversial report about Trump administration doubling down on its decision to strike alleged narco-trafficking boats in the Caribbean.
That's right. That was that cabinet meeting yesterday where Hegseth stood by that decision to launch a second strike on one alleged drug-carrying boat on September 2nd. Now, some in Congress say, this could be a potential war crime. Now they're opening investigations after the Washington Post reported last week that Hegseth gave an order to, quote, kill everybody on the boat.
For Insight, we're joined by retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Good morning. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with what you just heard there from the Secretary of Defense. What do you make about his reasoning to why the administration ordered this double tap strike on this boat?
Thank you for having me. And Secretary of Defense Hegseth is right that he gets to help set rules of engagement, but they do have to be anchored in our law. And we have a Department of Defense manual on the law of war. And the law of war has very specific requirements for how you treat combatants after they become disabled, or very specifically in the case of maritime combatants, what happens after a shipwreck or the loss of the vessel they're traveling on. So while you can have rules of engagement, and certainly the president gets to set a level of lethality, you still have to adhere to the laws and the Department of Defense guidance that's laid out very explicitly. And I should remind people that these laws are not just made up. They're actually anchored in the Geneva Convention. And the specific law, the specific guidance referring to how you treat shipwrecked sailors is anchored in Geneva Convention language. So something that we've adhered to with, with previous presidential and congressional actions.
Admiral, what would you say is important to watch as this story, which is still evolving, continues to evolve?
Well, I'm very concerned that, first there's like this, over the weekend, there was a denial that it even happened by the secretary. Then an acknowledgement that it happened, but it wasn't him. It strikes me that, that there's an effort here to transfer accountability and responsibility from the Secretary of Defense, who is overall accountable and responsible for the actions of the department, to a combatant commander in the field who is governed by the guidance she or he gets from that secretary. So first, I hope that Congress, as they do oversight of this, is wise enough to maintain their focus on Secretary Hegseth and his actions and his guidance first and foremost, because to me, that's where you start your investigation. It might be where you end it, or you might go down and have to talk to others.
We know that Admiral Mitch Bradley is going to be speaking behind closed doors to a group of lawmakers. Let's say you were in that room. What questions would you have for Admiral Bradley?
I think I'm confident that his opening statements will answer the questions. He's a straightforward guy. What guidance did you have? What guidance did you seek clarification for? What did your lawyers tell you? There is an aspect of this that has not been much covered, which is that a good number of judge advocate generals, the military's lawyers, have been aggressively replaced, the ones at the senior level, by Secretary Hegseth. The ones who govern the services were fired without cause in the first week of his time in office. And he's had trouble replacing them because I think they have a litmus test for discussion with those lawyers that's part of it. So I would be interested in what kind of legal guidance Admiral Bradley was getting. I really think, again, if they want to know what happened, the Congress needs to talk to Secretary Hegseth. And I think they're going to find him very elusive.
What is your perspective on the situation with Venezuela? Is the Trump administration angling for a regime change?
So first, the justification for this is anchored in some important facts. One, several 100,000 Americans have died from fentanyl over the last few years. Two, fentanyl's a drug. Three, Venezuela deals in drugs. But the problem, of course, is I think most of us understand now Venezuela doesn't deal in fentanyl. If you want to take care of fentanyl, you have to talk to China, who provides the precursor agents, and Mexico, where their cartels are the ones who distribute fentanyl in the United States. So this is kind of a weird action where we're taking on like a secondary or tertiary player in this game in Venezuela. Maduro is an awful person, the president of Venezuela. He is not the legitimate president. He lost the election in July of 2024, and he's used the military to keep himself in place. And he probably is part of a narco cartel. All those things are true, but that's not how the president has framed this for the American people, which is this is about stopping the scourge of fentanyl, which all Americans dislike. So I really wish we could get our argument straight on this. And finally, it leaves us with a potential for, I guess we might do regime change. And this is something I never thought President Trump was interested in, the idea of regime change, because the problem with regime change is that you can get rid of Maduro. I think we could do that reasonably effectively. But you can't guarantee Maduro is replaced by the legitimately elected leaders of Venezuela, vice maybe some kind of military coup.
What would be, to your point, what would be your concern if the Maduro regime ultimately fell? Not just from a military standpoint, but you got to think, there's already been millions of displaced Venezuelans who have fled the country. We potentially could see more, one would assume.
Well, certainly this could go well, which is the legitimately elected leadership comes back in, is popularly put back in, and they won the election going away. I mean, the polling numbers that we're seeing it wasn't 51-49. Of course, Maduro's got some bad actors around him, the interior minister, the defense minister, and the army. If they decide to hold on to power because they've profited as much as Maduro has from the last decade of narco terror, of narco cartels and things like that, and exploitation of their fossil fuels, then if they decide not to leave, then you could easily have a populist revolt into the military, and that would be horrific, I think, in terms of, you're right, refugees, internally displaced people, and then people just being killed. So there's no guarantee how it'll go, which is why President Trump has historically not liked regime change, and he's been pretty consistent and clear about that over the last decade.
All right, retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate the insight.
Thank you for having me.